7 years of marriage, and I found out it was over the same way you find out a restaurant's closing. Someone else just walked in and took my seat. The wine was a 2017 Willamette Valley Pinot, $89. I'd practiced saying the name in my truck so I wouldn't sound like an idiot when I ordered. Jenna wore the black dress I loved, the one that always made me feel like I'd married up. 7 years ago tonight, she wore white. I wore a rented suit and a grin I couldn't control. Now Graham Ashford stood at our table like he'd been invited. Tailored jacket. Watch, that probably cost more than my van. Smile, that said he already knew how this story ended. Jenna, he said, not to her, but about her, like I wasn't there. Friday night, that new place on 5th. I'll send a car. She didn't say no. She didn't say anything. And my anniversary wine sat untouched in my hand, going warm like something already dead. I always thought betrayal would feel like a knife. Turns out, it feels like being erased, slowly, politely, while someone holds the door open for you on the way out. I don't remember standing up. 1 second I was gripping the stem of my wine glass, and the next I was on my feet, napkin falling, fork clattering against the plate like a small, stupid bell announcing something nobody wanted to hear. Graham didn't flinch. That was the thing that got me. He looked at me the way you look at a waiter who brought the wrong appetizer, mildly inconvenienced, already calculating how much to dock from the tip. Marcus, right? He extended his hand like we were meeting at a networking event. She talks about you. The AC guy. You keep people comfortable. That's a real skill. I didn't take his hand. Just stood there, my knuckles white around the tablecloth. Jenna's fingers found my wrist. Not gentle. Urgent. Marcus, sit down. Not Graham, this is completely inappropriate. Not, we're celebrating our anniversary. You need to leave. Just sit down. Like I was the one making a scene. Like my standing up was the embarrassing part of this whole thing. The jazz trio in the corner kept playing, something smooth and indifferent. A couple 2 tables over glanced our way, then quickly looked back at their menus. The waiter hovered near the kitchen door, pretending to check something on his notepad. I'm good standing, I said. My voice came out quieter than I wanted. Steadier, too, which surprised me. Graham's smile didn't waver, not even a crack. Look, I didn't mean to crash the party. Just wanted to firm up plans. He nodded at me. Actually nodded, like we were buddies wrapping up a conversation at the water cooler. You two enjoy your night. Then he squeezed her shoulder. Let me say that again. He squeezed my wife's shoulder, right in front of me, his hand resting there for just a beat too long, his thumb brushing the bare skin above her collarbone. Familiar, practiced, she didn't pull away. He walked off toward the bar without looking back. Why would he? He'd already won whatever game he was playing. I was just the guy who hadn't figured out the rules yet. I sat down, slowly, like my body was moving through water. Marcus, you want to explain that? I kept my voice low. Didn't trust it to stay steady if I let it get any louder. He's my boss. She picked up her wine glass, swirled it, didn't drink. He's like that with everyone. It's just how he is. He asked you to dinner in front of me on our anniversary. You're overreacting. That word, overreacting. I'd heard it before, more times than I could count over the past few months. Every time I asked why she was working late, every time I noticed her texting someone and going quiet when I walked in, every time I mentioned that something felt different between us and couldn't put my finger on what. You're overreacting. You're being paranoid. You're stressed from work. Maybe I was. Maybe I had been. But I wasn't blind, and I wasn't stupid. That bracelet, I said, nodding at her wrist. Where'd you get it? She froze. Just for a second, a flicker of something behind her eyes before the mask slid back into place. This? I bought it for myself. Last month. I knew she was lying. I knew it the same way, rain's coming before the first drop falls. Something in the air, something in the pressure. But I picked up my fork anyway. We finished dinner in silence. The steak I'd spent 2 weeks side jobs to afford tasted like cardboard. The wine never got touched. The jazz kept playing, cheerful and oblivious, and when the check came, I paid it without looking at the total because I didn't want to know how much this night had cost me. Not in dollars, in everything else. The parking garage was cold. Our footsteps echoed off the concrete, out of sync. Her heels clicked sharp and fast. My boots shuffled behind like I was already being left behind. And there they were, side by side, my work van, white with Web HVAC stenciled on the side. In blue letters I'd painted myself. And 3 spaces down, a matte black Tesla that probably cost more than I'd make in 2 years. Graham's car. Had to be. She didn't even glance at it. I couldn't stop staring. In the car, she pulled out her phone immediately. Fingers moving across the screen, the pale glow lighting up her face. Texting someone. I didn't ask who. The country station came on when I started the engine. Some song about a man who lost everything and found God in a bottle. I turned it off. You're being quiet, she said after a few miles. Just thinking. About what? I almost laughed. Almost told her exactly what I was thinking. About Graham's hand on her shoulder, about the bracelet that cost more than anything I'd ever bought her, about the way she'd said sit down instead of defending me. Instead, I said, nothing. Long day. She went back to her phone. The screen glowed, buzzed. She smiled at something on it, a small private smile I used to think was reserved for me. When we got home, she went straight to the shower, didn't say goodnight, didn't kiss my cheek, just disappeared into the steam and the sound of running water, her phone face down on the dresser. I stood in our bedroom, the room where we'd made love 1,000 times, where we'd fought and made up and planned futures, and I felt like a stranger who'd wandered into someone else's house. Her side of the closet was thinner than I remembered. Gaps where dresses used to be, empty hangers where blouses had hung. When had that happened? When had she started moving out in pieces? So slowly, I didn't notice until the space was already half empty. I could hear her voice through the bathroom door, talking low, laughing, on the phone, in the shower, on our anniversary night. I walked to the guest room. The bed was made with sheets we'd never used, pillows no one had slept on. Cold. Unfamiliar. I lay down on top of the covers, still in my clothes, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice I didn't want to hear asked a question I couldn't answer. When was the last time you really looked at her? When was the last time you asked what she needed? Instead of assuming you already knew, I pushed it down, buried it under the anger, under the hurt, but it didn't go away. It never does. The next morning, she made coffee like nothing happened. 2 cups, cream in mine. The cruelest kindness is pretending everything's fine when you both know it isn't. I came downstairs to find her in her robe, hair still damp, standing at the counter like it was any other Sunday. The coffee maker hissed and dripped. Morning light came through the kitchen window, soft and golden, the kind of light that makes everything look peaceful even when it's not. Didn't hear you get up, she said without turning around. Couldn't sleep. She didn't ask why. Just poured the coffee into my mug, the blue one, with the chipped handle that I'd had since before we were married, and set it on the counter between us. Cream already stirred in, just how I liked it. That small thing, that tiny act of remembering how I take my coffee, hit me harder than anything Graham had done the night before, because it meant she still knew me, still paid attention to the little things. And yet, somehow, we'd ended up here anyway. I've got a meeting at 2, she said, scrolling through her phone. Might run late. Don't wait up for dinner. Sunday. She had a meeting on Sunday? I didn't say anything. Just wrapped my hands around the warm mug and watched the steam curl up toward the ceiling. You okay? She asked, finally looking at me, her eyes searching my face for something. Permission, maybe. Or forgiveness. Or just confirmation that I was going to keep playing along. I wanted to ask her 100 things. Who was on the phone last night? Where did the bracelet really come from? How long has this been going on? Do you even love me anymore? Instead, I said, just tired. Long week coming up. She nodded, relieved. The tension in her shoulders loosened just a fraction. Well, don't work too hard. I almost laughed. That was always the problem, wasn't it? I worked too hard. Always had. 60-hour weeks, crawling through attics and basements, coming home with aching knees and grease under my fingernails, too tired to do anything but eat dinner in front of the TV and fall asleep by 9. Building a life for us, I'd told myself. Providing. But you can provide a life without ever really being present for it. I was starting to understand that now. She kissed my cheek on her way out, quick, automatic, the kind of kiss you give a roommate. And then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her. Her car started in the driveway, pulled away, and I stood there in my own kitchen, holding my coffee, wondering when my marriage had become something I watched happen from the outside. Work didn't start until Monday, but I couldn't stay in that house. The silence was too loud, every room haunted by conversations we weren't having, so I grabbed my keys and headed to Hank's. The bar was mostly empty at noon on a Sunday, just a couple of old-timers watching football on the screen, above the liquor bottles and Hank himself, wiping down glasses with a rag that had seen better days. The place smelled like fryer oil and cheap beer and decades of stories soaked into the wood. I'd been coming here since I was 22. It felt more like home than my actual home did right now. Roy was already there when I walked in, hunched over a plate of wings and a Bud Light. He looked up when the door swung shut behind me, and something in his face shifted. That knowing look he got when he could tell something was wrong. Well, you look like hell, he said, pushing out the stool next to him with his boot. Sit down before you fall down. I sat, ordered a coffee, black this time, no cream, and stared at the football game without seeing it. You gonna tell me, or am I gonna have to beat it out of you? Roy asked after a few minutes of silence. It's nothing. Brother, I've known you 20 years. That ain't your nothing face. That's your something broke and I don't know how to fix it face. He took a long pull from his beer. Spill. So I told him, all of it. Graham showing up at the restaurant, the hand on her shoulder, the dinner invitation in front of me, the way she said sit down like I was a dog getting too excited at company, the phone call, in the shower, the bracelet. Roy listened without interrupting, which was unlike him. When I finished, he let out a long breath and shook his head. You check your phone? No. Why the hell not? I stared at my coffee. The answer sounded stupid even in my own head, because then I'd have to do something about it. Roy was quiet for a moment. Then he said softer than I expected. You know what you're describing, right? You know what all of this adds up to? Yeah. My voice came out rough. I know. So what are you going to do? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Because doing something meant blowing up the last 7 years of my life. And I wasn't ready for that. Wasn't ready to admit that the thing I'd built, the house, the marriage, the future I'd pictured, might have been rotting from the inside the whole time I was too busy working to notice. Roy finished his beer and signaled for another. You remember when Lisa had that thing with the guy from her book club? I nodded. It was years ago, but I remembered. Roy had shown up at my door at 2 a.m, drunk and crying, saying his marriage was over. But it wasn't. They'd worked through it somehow. Forgiveness ain't forgetting, he said now, his voice carrying the weight of experience. It's just deciding the future's worth more than the past. He paused. But that only works if she wants to stay, Marcus. You sure she does? I looked at my reflection in the dark coffee. The man staring back at me looked tired, lost. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know anything anymore. After Roy left, I didn't go home. Couldn't face those quiet rooms again, not yet. Instead, I drove across town to Danny's place. A one-bedroom apartment in a complex that had seen better days, the kind of building where the hallways always smelled like someone else's dinner. He buzzed me in without asking why I was there. That was Danny. No questions until you were ready to answer them. His apartment was small, but clean. A couch facing a TV that was always on, a kitchenette with a coffee maker and a microwave, a window that looked out on the parking lot. After his divorce, he'd stripped his life down to the essentials. Said it made things simpler. I used to think he was giving up. Now I wondered if he'd just figured something out before the rest of us. Beer's in the fridge, he said, dropping onto the couch. You look like you need one, or 5. I grabbed 2 bottles and handed him one. Sat down in the chair across from him. The TV was showing some home renovation show, the volume low. Couples arguing about countertops like it mattered. Jenna? He asked after a while. How'd you know? He shrugged. You've got that look. Same one I had before Michelle left. He took a long drink. What happened? I gave him the short version. The restaurant. Graham. The phone call in the shower. He listened the way he always did. Quiet, patient, not jumping to conclusions. When I finished, he didn't say anything right away. Just stared at the TV for a minute, watching some guy tear out a wall with a sledgehammer. You know what killed my marriage? He said finally. It wasn't the fighting. Wasn't even when she started staying out late or stopped laughing at my jokes. He set his beer down. It was realizing we hadn't really talked in 3 years. We were just 2 people sharing a mortgage and pretending that was enough. The words landed somewhere deep in my chest, heavier than I expected. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept that she's changed? No, man. He looked at me then. Really looked. You're supposed to ask yourself if you noticed she was changing, or if you were too busy being right to see. I opened my mouth to argue, to tell him I'd been there, I'd been present. I'd done everything a husband was supposed to do, but the words died in my throat, because I wasn't sure anymore. I wasn't sure of anything. I ran into someone from her office a few weeks back, Danny said. At that bar on 7th. Some woman, marketing department. We got to talking. And? She said Jenna's been different lately. Sad. Distant. He paused. She said Jenna talks about you like you're already gone. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. What's that supposed to mean? It means maybe she's been lonely too, Marcus. Doesn't make what she's doing right. But it might mean Graham's not the point. He's just the exit sign she finally found. I drove home in silence, Danny's words echoing in my head. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Her car wasn't there, working late. Don't wait up. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in the living room with the lights off. The clock on the wall ticked loud in the emptiness. I thought about all the times Jenna had asked me to take a vacation. Really take one. Not just a long weekend where I check my work phone every hour. All the times she'd suggested date nights I was too tired for. All the times she'd stopped asking. Eventually, I wandered into the bedroom, opened her jewelry drawer without really knowing why. Looking for something I couldn't name. The anniversary watch was there. The one I'd bought her for our 5th year. 3 months of side jobs, overtime, skipped lunches. She'd cried when she opened it. Wore it every day for almost a year. Now it sat in the corner of the drawer, dusty, forgotten. And right beside it, gleaming like it owned the space, was the gold bracelet. Thin, elegant, new. I picked up the watch, felt its weight in my palm. She hadn't worn it in months. I'd noticed, somewhere in the back of my mind, but I told myself she was just rotating her jewelry. Trying new things, I set it back down, closed the drawer. Some things you can't unsee, some questions you can't unask, and some truths have been waiting in plain sight the whole time, just hoping you'd finally look. He found her old journal by accident, or maybe she left it where he'd find it. Either way, the truth was dated 3 years back, and it read like a letter from a woman I'd never bothered to meet. Sleep wouldn't come. Not that night, not the next. By 2 in the morning on Tuesday, I'd given up trying. The house felt like a museum after hours. Everything in its place, nothing alive. I wandered room to room in the dark, running my fingers along walls I'd painted myself, furniture we'd picked out together, picture frames holding smiles that felt like they belonged to strangers. I ended up in the home office, the small room at the end of the hall that was supposed to be a nursery someday, back when someday still felt possible. Now it held a desk, a filing cabinet, boxes of old tax returns we'd never gotten around to shredding. I wasn't looking for anything, just moving, just trying to outrun the thoughts circling my head like vultures. The box was shoved behind the filing cabinet, covered in a thin layer of dust. Old photos, birthday cards, a few books she'd never finished, and at the bottom, a leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover, J.H. Jenna Hollis, her maiden name. I shouldn't have opened it. I knew that even as my fingers found the first page. Whatever was in here, it wasn't meant for me. Private thoughts, old wounds, the kind of things you write down because you can't say them out loud. But I opened it anyway, because I was tired of not knowing, tired of guessing, tired of feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. The entries started about 4 years ago. Some were short, just a line or two about her day. Others went on for pages, her handwriting getting messier as the emotions spilled out. I skipped ahead, looking for something I couldn't name. And then I found it. An entry from 3 years back, right around our 4th anniversary. I asked Marcus if we could go to Charleston for our anniversary. Just a weekend. We've never really traveled, and I thought it would be good for us. He said we couldn't afford it. We went to Applebee's instead. He was on his phone half the time, checking emails about some job. I sat across from him and watched him not see me. I don't think he looked up once during the whole meal. I remembered that dinner. I remembered feeling proud that we'd saved money, that I was being responsible. I didn't remember her face, didn't remember if she'd seemed disappointed. I hadn't been paying attention. The next entry was worse. He came home tonight and went straight to the TV. I made dinner, that chicken recipe his mom used to make, and he ate it without really tasting it. I sat next to him for an hour. He didn't say 10 words to me, not because he was angry, just because he didn't have anything to say. I'm starting to feel like furniture. Something that came with the house, furniture. She'd written that word 3 years ago, and I'd never known. Never felt her slipping away because I was too busy being tired, being practical, being present in body, while being completely absent in every way that mattered. I kept reading. Couldn't stop now. It's our 5th anniversary tomorrow. I don't know what to expect. Part of me hopes he'll surprise me. Part of me knows he won't. And then, a day later, he bought me a beautiful watch. He was so proud of himself, I could see it in his face. He worked so hard to afford it. And I love him for that, I do. But when I opened the box, all I could think was, he never asked what I wanted. He decided what I'd love and gave it to me like a gift to himself, like he was checking a box. Good husband, bought anniversary present, but the present wasn't for me, it was for his idea of me, the woman he thinks I am, not the woman I've become. The journal shook in my hands, or maybe my hands were shaking. Hard to tell. I'd been so proud of that watch. So, sure, I'd done something right. 3 months of overtime, skipping lunches, taking jobs I hated so I could afford something beautiful for her. And the whole time, she was sitting across from me at that anniversary dinner, smiling and thanking me, and feeling more alone than ever. The watch was proof of my love. No. The watch was proof I'd never really seen her at all. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat at the desk with the journal open, reading page after page of a marriage I didn't recognize. The woman in these entries wasn't the Jenna I thought I knew. She was sadder, lonelier, more desperate for connection than I'd ever realized. And the man she wrote about, the one who came home tired, who watched TV instead of talking, who showed love through work and duty and providing, I recognized him. I just never knew how small he'd made her feel. By the time the sun came up, I felt hollowed out, like someone had reached inside my chest and scooped out everything that used to make sense. At work, I moved through the day on autopilot, showed up at a job in Westbrook, some retired couple whose heat pump had died overnight. The husband followed me around the basement, talking about the Braves and the weather and his grandkids, and I nodded and made the right sounds without hearing any of it. When I went to refill the refrigerant, my hands were shaking so bad I overcharged the system, had to drain it, and start over. The homeowner asked if I was feeling all right. Just the cold, I said. Gets in your bones this time of year. He nodded like that made sense. It didn't. Nothing made sense anymore. On my lunch break, I sat in my van in a grocery store parking lot and called Roy. He answered on the third ring, the sound of an impact wrench whining in the background. You sound like hell, he said. Same thing he always said. Founder Journal. The impact wrench stopped. A long pause. And? 3 years, Roy. 3 years of entries about how I wasn't there. How I made her feel invisible. How she tried to get my attention and I just didn't notice. Roy's silence stretched long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then he sighed, the kind of sigh that carries years of hard-won wisdom. Brother, you're not going to like what I'm about to say. Say it anyway. You can't be mad at her for leaving if you left first. You just never told her you were gone. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him I'd never cheated, never lied, never broke a single vow. But the words wouldn't come, because he wasn't wrong. There's more than one way to abandon someone. You can walk out the door, or you can just stop showing up while you're still standing in the room. So what do I do now? My voice sounded foreign, smaller than I remembered. Hell if I know. The impact wrench started up again in the background. But maybe start by asking yourself a question you've been avoiding. What's that? Did she betray you? Or did she finally stop waiting for a husband who'd already left? He hung up before I could answer. Probably knew I didn't have one. That evening, something unexpected happened. Jenna came home early. Not late, not working through dinner, not distracted by her phone the second she walked in. She set her bag down by the door and found me in the kitchen, standing over a pot of spaghetti I didn't remember starting. Smells good, she said, quiet, uncertain. We ate at the table, actually at the table, not in front of the TV, and the silence between us felt different than it had in months. Less hostile. More fragile, like we were both holding our breath, waiting for something to break. Halfway through the meal, she reached across and touched my hand. Marcus, are you okay? You've seemed off lately. I looked at her. Really looked. Maybe for the first time in years. The lines around her eyes I'd never noticed. The way she held her shoulders, tense even when she was trying to relax. The tiredness that went deeper than sleep could fix. I almost told her everything. The journal, the watch, the questions eating me alive. Instead I said, just tired. Big job tomorrow. She nodded. The moment passed. Her hand slipped away from mine. Later, she fell asleep on the couch, watching some cooking show. Her head tilted at an angle that would hurt in the morning. I pulled the old Afghan off the back of the recliner and draped it over her. Stood there for a moment, watching her breathe. I used to do this when we were first married. Watch her sleep. Marvel that someone this beautiful had chosen me. When had I stopped looking? Her phone glowed on the coffee table. One notification lit up the screen. Graham Ashford. I didn't read it. Just turned off the TV, killed the lights, and walked to the guest room alone. Some truths you're not ready to face, and some doors, once open, can never be closed again. She left her laptop open, and I swore I wasn't going to look. I lasted about 30 seconds. Saturday morning. Gray light through the kitchen windows. The smell of coffee she'd brewed before her shower. I could hear the water running upstairs. Hear her humming something, that song she liked. The one about second chances that always played on her drive to work. The laptop sat on this kitchen table, screen glowing. Open to her email. I walked past it, grabbed my coffee, told myself it was none of my business, told myself I trusted her, told myself all the lies I've been telling for months. Then I saw his name, Graham Ashford. 3 emails in the last hour. The preview text on the top one read, last night was exactly what I needed. Can't wait for... My hand was on the trackpad before I made the conscious decision to move. The emails opened, one after another, not explicit, no photos, no graphic descriptions, but undeniable. The language of intimacy. The shorthand of 2 people who'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Last night was exactly what I needed. You make me feel seen. Can't wait for Friday. Wear the blue dress. You know the one. He doesn't suspect anything. He never does. That last line, those 6 words. They hit harder than everything else combined. Not the affair, not the lies, the contempt. The casual certainty that I was too oblivious, too checked out, too nothing to notice my own wife slipping away. She wasn't even afraid of getting caught. I wasn't a threat. I was furniture, just like she'd written in that journal. Background noise in her real life. My hands were shaking. Coffee sloshed over the rim of my mug, burning my fingers. I didn't feel it. Didn't feel anything except a cold, spreading numbness that started in my chest and worked its way outward. I pulled out my phone, took screenshots, sent them to myself, evidence, proof. I didn't know what I was going to do with them, but I needed something solid. Something that couldn't be explained away or gaslit into nothing. The shower stopped. I closed the laptop, set it exactly where it had been, sat down at the table with my coffee, and waited. She came down a few minutes later, towel wrapped around her hair, humming that same song. She stopped when she saw my face. "Marcus, what's wrong?" I looked at her, really looked. Tried to find the woman I'd married somewhere behind those careful eyes. I saw the emails. 3 words. 7 years of marriage, everything changed. Her face cycled through emotions like a slot machine. Shock, guilt, fear, and then, settling into place like a mask she'd worn before, defiance. "You went through my laptop? You're sleeping with your boss." Silence. The coffee maker dripped. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and went quiet. "I'm not going to apologize for finding out," I said. "So don't make this about me looking." She crossed her arms, leaned against the counter, didn't deny it. That was the thing that killed me. She didn't even try. "How long?" I asked. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She looked away. Out the window, out of the backyard I'd spent 2 summers landscaping. The fence I'd built with my own hands. The patio where we'd talked about having kids someday. 2 months, she said finally. Give or take. 2 months, 8 weeks, 60-some days of lies and excuses and working late and don't wait up. I did the math in my head, trying to pinpoint when it started, trying to remember if there'd been a moment I should have seen. "Why?" She laughed. Not a happy sound. "You really want to know? You really want to have this conversation?" I think I deserve that much. "Fine." She turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw something real behind the mask. Anger, pain. Years of it, compressed into a single look. "When's the last time you asked me about my life, Marcus? My dreams? What I actually wanted?" I worked. I provided. I was faithful. "You were a roommate with a ring." Her voice cracked. "You were reliable. You were stable. You were there. But you weren't a husband. Not really. Not for years." The words landed like punches. I wanted to fight back. Wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I'd given her everything, that I'd sacrificed and struggled and built this life for us. But I remembered the journal, the entries I'd read 2 nights ago, and I knew she wasn't lying. "The Charleston trip," she said. "Remember that? I begged you to take a weekend with me. Just us. You said we couldn't afford it. We couldn't. We could. You just didn't want to. You wanted to save for the new van, for the business, for someday." She wiped her eyes. "I got tired of waiting for someday, Marcus. I got tired of being the thing you'd get around to when everything else was handled." So that makes it okay to cheat?" "No." Her voice dropped. "No, it doesn't. But it makes it understandable, at least to me." I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, too loud in the quiet kitchen. "I gave you everything," I said. "The house, the life, everything I had. You gave me things." She pointed toward the bedroom, toward the jewelry drawer I'd opened 2 nights ago. "That watch you bought me, I loved it. For about a week. Then I realized you never asked what I wanted. You just decided. You always just decided. The watch. The goddamn watch." "I'm going to Megan's," she said, already moving toward the stairs. "I'll pack a bag. We can figure out the rest later." "Jenna, I'm not saying I'm right, Marcus." She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, one hand on the railing. Her voice was thick, tired, done. "I'm saying we were both wrong, just in different ways." She went upstairs. I heard drawers opening and closing, a suitcase being pulled from the closet, the sounds of a marriage being packed into a carry-on. 20 minutes later, the front door closed behind her. Her car started, pulled away. I stood in the kitchen alone. Her coffee cup sat on the counter, half full, still warm. After a while, I walked to the bedroom, opened my nightstand drawer, pulled out the ring box where I kept my wedding band at night. I always took it off to sleep, habit from the early days when my hands would swell from work. I held the ring in my palm, turned it over, looked at the inscription inside. M and J. Forever, forever. What a joke. I twisted it back onto my finger, then took it off again, then put it back on. Not ready, not yet, but soon. The house was quieter than it had ever been. Funny how you don't notice a sound until it stops, and then the silence is all you can hear. The first night alone, I learned that emptiness has a weight. It presses down on you, fills up the spaces where another person used to be. Every room felt too big, too still, like a held breath that wouldn't release. I kept almost calling her name. Walking into the kitchen, "Jenna, you want coffee?" The words forming in my throat before I remembered. Passing the bathroom, "Jenna, did you move my razor?" Sitting down to dinner, a frozen pizza I didn't taste, and almost asking what she wanted to watch. Muscle memory, 7 years of habits that didn't know they were over yet. Her side of the closet had gaps now, like missing teeth in a smile. I'd noticed the thinning before, but now it was obvious. Whole sections emptied out, hangers swaying slightly in the draft from the vent. The bathroom was worse. Her toothbrush? Gone. Her shampoo, the fancy kind that smelled like lavender, gone. The little basket of makeup she kept on the counter? Gone. She'd been preparing for this, packing in pieces, moving out so slowly I hadn't seen it happening until the space was already half empty. I opened the kitchen cabinet where we kept the coffee mugs. 2 cups sat side by side, mine with the chipped handle, hers with the faded sunflower print. I'd given her that mug for our first Christmas together, before we were even engaged. She'd laughed and said it was the ugliest thing she'd ever seen, then drank from it every morning for 6 years. She'd left it behind, hadn't even bothered to pack it. I closed the cabinet, poured my coffee into my own mug, sat at the table in the gray morning light, and stared at the empty chair across from me. Time moved strangely. Hours felt like minutes, minutes stretched into hours. I watched the shadows shift across the floor, listened to the house settle and creak, and tried to remember what I used to do with myself before every moment was filled with the absence of her. I called in sick on Monday, first time in 3 years, told the answering service I had the flu, that I'd be back by Wednesday. The lie came easily. Everything felt like a lie now. Roy texted around noon. "You okay, brother?" I typed back, "Fine." His response came fast, "Bullshit. I'm coming over." I didn't argue, didn't have the energy. He showed up with a 6-pack and a bag of gas station beef jerky, like he was settling in for a long haul. We sat on the back porch, even though it was cold, low 40s, our breath fogging in the air, because the house felt too suffocating to stay inside. For a while, neither of us said anything. Just sat in the lawn chairs I'd bought on sale 3 summers ago, drinking beer and watching the dead leaves skitter across the brown grass. "She really gone?" Roy asked finally. "Megan's place, for now." He nodded, took a long pull from his bottle. "You talked to a lawyer yet?" "No." The word came out harsh, final, like even saying it made things too real. "You're gonna have to eventually." "I know." More silence. A plane passed overhead, low enough that we could hear the rumble of its engines. I wondered where it was going, wondered if the people inside were running toward something or away from it. "Tell me what happened," Roy said. "All of it. You've been giving me pieces, but I want the whole thing." So I told him everything, the emails I'd found, the confrontation, the things she'd said. "Roommate with a ring, tired of waiting for someday. You gave me things instead of yourself." The way she'd packed her bag in 20 minutes, like she'd rehearsed it, like she'd been ready to go for months and was just waiting for permission. Roy listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "She's not totally wrong, man." I looked at him, felt something hot and dangerous rise in my chest. "Whose side are you on?" "Yours. That's why I'm telling you the truth instead of what you want to hear." He set his beer down on the armrest of the chair, looked out at the yard, at the fence I'd built, at the patio I'd laid stone by stone. "I've watched you two for years, Marcus. At barbecues, at Christmas parties, at that fundraiser thing Lisa dragged us all to. You know what I saw?" "What?" "Jenna trying to get your attention. Laughing at something, looking over to see if you noticed. Touching your arm when she talked. And you," he shook his head, "you were always somewhere else. Checking your phone, talking to the guys about work, half listening while she told stories you'd already tuned out." "Well, that's not—" "I watched her stop trying," he said, cutting me off. "Watched it happen in slow motion over 3-4 years. She used to light up around you. Then one day she didn't, and I don't think you even noticed." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he didn't know what he was talking about, that our marriage was fine, until she decided to blow it up. But the words wouldn't come. Because I remembered, suddenly with terrible clarity, the barbecue last 4th of July. Jenna laughing with Lisa by the grill, looking over at me with that smile she used to have, and me, standing by the cooler, scrolling through work emails on my phone, not even seeing her. "I'm not saying what she did was right," Roy said quietly. "Cheating's cheating. There's no excuse for it. But you gotta ask yourself something, brother." What? "Were you betraying her first, just in a different way?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. He stayed for another hour, finished his beer, left the rest of the 6-pack in my fridge, and clapped me on the shoulder on his way out. "Call me if you need anything," he said. "And Marcus?" "Yeah? Don't do anything stupid." The door closed behind him. I was alone again. The silence rushed back in, filling every corner. That night, I drank the rest of the whiskey. Not the beer Roy left, the good stuff. The bottle of Maker's Mark I'd been saving for some special occasion that never came. I sat in the dark living room, the only light the blue glow of a TV I wasn't watching, and I drank until the edges of the world went soft and blurry. It didn't help. The thoughts kept coming anyway. Around midnight, I found myself in the home office again, the journal open on the desk in front of me, reading entries I'd already memorized, torturing myself with her handwriting, her words. the map of a marriage falling apart that I'd been too blind to see. He forgot my birthday. Not completely. He brought home flowers on his way from work. Gas station flowers, still in the plastic. He didn't even take the price tag off. I smiled and said thank you and put them in a vase, and he went to watch TV like he'd accomplished something. I threw them away the next morning. He never noticed. I remembered those flowers, remembered feeling proud of myself for remembering it all. I'd been slammed with work that week, 3 emergency calls in 2 days, and I'd still stopped to get her something. I never saw the price tag, never thought to take it off. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I just stopped planning dinners, stopped asking about his day, stopped trying to make conversation. Would he even notice? Or would we just drift along in silence forever, 2 ghosts haunting the same house? She'd written that 2 years ago, 2 years. And I hadn't noticed a thing. The memories came faster now, a flood I couldn't stop. Jenna asking if I was happy. Me grunting, I'm fine, without looking up from my phone. Jenna crying after her father's funeral. Me patting her back awkwardly, suggesting she get some rest, leaving her alone with her grief because I didn't know what to say. Jenna buying tickets to a concert, her favorite band, the one she'd loved since college, and me saying I was too tired, that maybe next time. There was no next time, not cruelties. That was the thing. Not abuse, not anger, not the kind of damage you could point to and name. Just indifference. 1,000 small moments of not showing up. 1,000 tiny abandonments that added up to something unforgivable. I put my head down on the desk. The journal pages crumpled under my forehead, and I cried. Not quiet tears, not dignified grief. I sobbed, the ugly, shaking kind that comes from somewhere deeper than your chest, the kind you can't control and can't stop. I cried for the marriage I'd lost, for the wife I'd failed, for the man I thought I was, and the man I'd actually been. Outside, rain began to fall. I could hear it on the roof, on the windows, steady and relentless, like the sky had decided to match my mood. I must have fallen asleep at the desk because the next thing I knew, morning light was coming through the window, and someone was knocking on the front door. I stumbled through the house, wiping my face, trying to look like something other than a man who'd spent the night falling apart. When I opened the door, Mrs. Delgado stood on the porch holding a covered dish. She was 68, a widow for 5 years now, and she'd lived next door since before Jenna and I moved in. She had a way of knowing things without being told. When someone was sick, when someone was struggling, when someone needed a meal, they didn't have to cook themselves. "You look terrible, mijo," she said, pushing past me into the kitchen. "Sit down. I made albondigas." I didn't argue, didn't have the strength. She heated the soup on the stove while I sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from me. When she set the bowl in front of me, steam rising, the smell of her cooking filling the kitchen, I felt something crack open in my chest again. "My husband works 60-hour weeks," she said, sitting down across from me, not eating, just watching. For 40 years, that man worked like the devil was chasing him. Provided everything. Never missed a bill, never missed a payment. I told myself it meant he loved me. She paused. Her eyes were distant, seeing something I couldn't. When he died, I realized I'd spent 40 years with a stranger who paid the bills. We never traveled. Never danced, never sat and talked about nothing for hours like we did when we were young. He was so busy building a life for us that he forgot to live it with me. She reached across the table and put her hand on mine. Small, warm, papery with age. "Don't wait until the end to start seeing people, mijo. Don't make his mistake." She left. A few minutes later, the soup still warming in the pot on the stove. I ate 3 bowls without tasting any of them. Cried again, quieter this time. And somewhere in the gray hours of that afternoon, sitting alone in the house I'd built for a future that wasn't coming, I finally understood. The question I'd been asking, how could she do this to me, was the wrong question. The right question was harder, sharper. It cut deeper because it had no one to blame but myself. How did I not see her drowning? Jenna's affair was her failure, her choice, her sin to carry. But the death of our marriage, that was on both of us. And maybe, if I was being honest, more on me than I wanted to admit. Because she'd been waving for help for years, and I'd been too busy building the boat to notice she was already underwater. I looked down at my wedding ring, still there, still tight on my finger. I didn't take it off. But I turned it, slowly, around and around, feeling the weight of it, the meaning of it, the lie of it. Something was changing inside me, something breaking apart to make room for something new. I didn't know what yet, but I knew I couldn't stay frozen forever. He drove for 3 hours without knowing where he was going. Turns out his hands knew even when his head didn't. I left the house at dawn. The sky still gray and heavy with clouds that hadn't decided whether to rain or snow. Didn't pack anything. Didn't tell anyone. Just grabbed my keys, climbed into the van, and started driving. The suburbs fell away. Strip malls gave way to gas stations to farmland, farmland to the kind of empty country roads, where you can drive for 20 minutes without seeing another car. I rolled down the window, even though it was cold, needed the air, needed something real against my skin. The landscape matched what was happening inside me. Late November fields, brown and bare, stripped down to nothing. Skeletal trees reaching toward a sky the color of old dishwater. Abandoned barns listing sideways. Their roofs caved in, their purpose forgotten. This was the America nobody put on postcards. The in-between places, the forgotten stretches, the land that just existed without anyone paying attention. I understood that feeling now. I didn't realize where I was going until I got there. Dad's old property. The 30 acres he'd worked his whole life, sold off after he died because none of us could afford to keep it. A development company owned it now. There were signs staked into the ground advertising future townhomes, coming soon, starting in the low 300s. But they hadn't broken ground yet. The land was still there, still empty, still waiting, and the oak tree was still standing. I pulled off onto the dirt shoulder and killed the engine. Sat there for a minute, looking at that tree through the windshield. It had to be 200 years old, maybe more. Dad used to say it was here before the family, before the farm, before any of us existed. Said it would be here long after we were gone, too. He was right about that, at least. I got out of the van. The cold hit me immediately, sharper out here, away from the city, with nothing to block the wind. I walked across the dead grass, my boots crunching on the frost until I reached the trunk. The bark was rough under my palm. I remember being 8 years old, standing in this exact spot, my father's hand on my shoulder. He'd brought me out here to teach me something. About the land, about work, about being a man. You take care of what's yours, he'd said. You show up, you do the work. That's what a man does. I'd spent my whole life trying to live up to those words, showing up, doing the work, taking care of what was mine. But he never taught me about presence, about listening, about staying with someone instead of just staying near them. Maybe because he didn't know how either. Maybe this was generational, a silence passed down like property, father to son, each of us repeating the same mistakes because we didn't know there was another way. I sat down with my back against the trunk. The cold seeped through my jeans, but I didn't care. I needed to be here, needed to sit with the ghost for a while. My phone rang around noon. Danny. Where are you, man? Roy said you haven't answered anyone in 2 days. Dad's old place, the property. A long pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end, processing. You want company? Not yet, but thanks. Okay. Another pause. You gonna be all right? I looked out at the empty field, the gray sky, the bare trees standing like witnesses to something I couldn't name. I don't know, I said. Ask me tomorrow. He let me go without pushing. That was Danny. He knew when to talk and when to let silence do the work. I put the phone away and closed my eyes, let the cold settle into my bones, let the quiet press in from all sides. And I did something I hadn't done in years. I put myself on trial. Exhibit A, the journal entries, 3 years of her loneliness documented in her own hand. Exhibit B, the times I chose work over her, the vacations I refused, the date nights I was too tired for, the conversations I half listened to while checking my phone. Exhibit C, the silence I called stability, the distance I called independence, the absence I convinced myself was presence because I was physically there, even when everything that mattered about me was somewhere else. Exhibit D, the truth I called paranoia, the signs I refused to see, the questions I didn't ask because I was afraid of the answers. The verdict came slowly, reluctantly, like a confession dragged out under bright lights. Not innocent, not guilty of her crimes. The affair was hers to own, but guilty of my own, guilty of abandonment by inches, guilty of loving the idea of a marriage more than the woman I married. A memory surfaced. Dad's funeral, 10 years ago, Mom standing by the casket, dry-eyed and distant. I'd thought she was being strong, holding it together. Later, at the reception, I'd overheard her talking to her sister. He provided everything, she'd said, everything except himself. I'd dismissed it at the time, thought she was just tired, just grieving. But she wasn't. She was telling the truth about 40 years of marriage to a man who showed up without ever really arriving. And I'd become exactly the same. The inheritance, nobody talks about. Not money, not land, not property. The way you learn to love, or fail to, by watching the people who raised you. I thought about forgiveness. Not forgiving Jenna, that wasn't mine to give yet, and maybe never would be, but forgiving myself. For being blind, for being scared, for being my father's son in all the wrong ways. Healing doesn't require forgiveness, I said out loud to no one, to the tree, to the ghosts. It just requires honesty. The words hung in the cold air, and somewhere inside me something shifted, something loosened. As I sat there, the first snow began to fall. Not heavy, just a few flakes at first, drifting down from the gray sky like afterthoughts. Then more, slowly thickening, until the air was full of white and the brown field began to disappear under a thin, clean blanket. Something about it felt like permission. Permission to stop fighting. Permission to stop blaming. Permission to let this chapter of my life end so something new could begin. I stood up, brushed the snow off my jeans, put my hand on the oak tree one more time, the way my father used to. "Thanks, Dad," I said quietly, "for what you taught me and for what you didn't." I walked back to the van. The snow was sticking to the windshield now, muffling the world, making everything soft and quiet. I turned on the wipers, started the engine, and sat there for a moment with my hands on the wheel. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I couldn't stay frozen. Time to move. Time to face her. Time to finish this, whatever that meant. I put the van in gear and headed back toward the city. The snow fell steadily now, covering the road behind me, erasing my tracks. Like the world was giving me a chance to start over. He didn't call first. Some things you have to say face to face, even when your face is the last thing she wants to see. 3 days had passed since I'd sat under that oak tree, watching the snow fall like the world was offering me a blank page. 3 days of thinking, of pacing, of picking up my phone and putting it back down. 3 days of knowing what I needed to do and not being ready to do it. On the fourth morning, I woke up before dawn, didn't even try to sleep anymore. My body had given up on rest, running on something harder and more urgent than caffeine. I stood in the bathroom, looking at my reflection in the mirror. The man looking back was someone I almost didn't recognize. Older than I remembered. Tired in a way that went deeper than sleep could fix. But there was something else there too. Something in the eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. A clarity. A stillness. I showered for the first time in 2 days. Put on clean clothes, not the sport coat from Kohl's, not trying to be someone I wasn't. Just jeans, a flannel shirt, my work boots, myself. I knew where she was. Megan's house across town, in that nice subdivision with the manicured lawns and the HOA rules about Christmas decorations. I could have called, could have texted, could have asked permission. But some conversations can't happen through a screen. Some words need to be spoken while looking into someone's eyes, watching their face, letting them see yours. Whatever was going to happen next, I needed to be there for it, fully present, maybe for the first time in years. I thought about what I was bringing with me, not anger. I'd burned through that, let it run its course in the dark hours, in the empty house, in the bottle of whiskey that was still sitting empty on the counter. Anger was easy. Anger was comfortable. But anger wasn't going to help either of us now, not accusations. I'd said them all already, that morning in the kitchen when everything fell apart. She knew what she'd done. Repeating it would just be cruelty, dressed up as righteousness, not hope. That was the hardest thing to leave behind. Some part of me, the part that still remembered her laugh, her hand in mine, the way she used to look at me like I was enough, wanted to believe we could fix this. Find our way back. Start over, but that door had closed. Maybe it had closed years ago, and we'd both just been pretending it was still open. What I was bringing was simpler. Honesty, accountability, closure for both of us. The drive took 20 minutes. Felt like hours. I didn't turn on the radio. Didn't rehearse what I was going to say. Just watched the road unspool in front of me, the neighborhoods getting nicer as I got closer, the houses getting bigger, the lawns getting greener despite the season. Megan's place was at the end of a cul-de-sac. 2 stories, brick facade, a wreath on the door that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Jenna's car sat in the driveway, snow still dusting the windshield from last night. I parked on the street, killed the engine, sat there with my hands on the wheel, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could still leave. Turn around, go home, send a text like a coward, let lawyers handle the rest. Nobody would blame me. After what she'd done, nobody would expect me to be the bigger man. But I wasn't doing this to be the bigger man. I was doing this because I needed to look at her one more time. Needed to say the things I should have said years ago. Needed to end this chapter with something other than silence. I got out of the van, walked up the driveway. The morning was cold, my breath fogging in the air, the crunch of salt under my boots. I knocked. Footsteps inside. A pause. Someone looking through the peephole. Then the door swung open, and Megan stood there, arms crossed, face arranged into an expression of pure contempt. She doesn't want to see you. I know. My voice came out steadier than I expected. But I'm not here to fight. I'm here to finish. Something in the way I said it made her pause. She studied my face for a long moment, looking for the anger, the bitterness, the accusations she was prepared to defend against. Whatever she saw, it wasn't what she expected. Wait here, she said finally, and closed the door. I stood on the porch, hands in my pockets, watching my breath disappear into the cold air. A minute passed. 2. Long enough that I started to wonder if Jenna had told her to send me away, if I'd driven all this way for nothing. Then the door opened again, and there she was. She looked exhausted. Smaller, somehow, like the weight of the last week had compressed her into a lesser version of herself. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Wearing an old sweatshirt I recognized, one of mine actually, from years ago. I didn't know she'd kept it. We stood there on this porch, the cold settling between us, neither of us knowing how to start. "Can we talk?" I asked. She glanced back into the house, Megan hovering somewhere behind her, ready to intervene, then stepped outside and pulled the door closed. "Say what you came to say, Marcus." No invitation inside, no offer of coffee. Just the two of us standing in the December cold, our breath mingling in the air before disappearing. I'd thought about this moment for days, rehearsed 100 different versions in my head, but now that I was here, all those rehearsed words fell away. What came out instead was simpler, truer. "I'm not here to yell," I said. "I've done that already. I'm here to say what I should have said years ago." She watched me, guarded, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "You were right." The words tasted like gravel, but I pushed through. I wasn't there. I showed up every day, came home every night, paid the bills, and fixed the leaks, and thought that was enough. But it wasn't. I gave you the house and the ring and the life I thought you wanted, and I never once stopped to ask if it was what you actually needed. Her eyes glistened. She didn't speak. "That's on me," I continued. "I can't take back the years I spent being present without being there, but I can tell you I see it now. I understand what I did or didn't do." "Marcus, let me finish, please." She nodded, wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. "What you did was wrong." My voice cracked, just slightly. "It broke something I can't fix. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you for it. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, but I understand you. I understand how you got there, and I'm sorry for my part in it." The tears spilled over now, running down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. "I'm sorry too," she whispered, "for all of it. I never wanted—" She stopped, took a shaky breath. "I never wanted to hurt you like this." "I know." We stood there in the cold, two people who had loved each other once, maybe still did in some broken way, letting the silence hold what words couldn't. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the anniversary watch. She stared at it, confused. "I want you to have this back," I said. "Not as a guilt trip, not as a reminder of what we lost. Just," I turned it over in my hand. "It shouldn't be sitting in a drawer, forgotten. It deserves better than that. You can keep it, sell it, throw it in a river. I don't care, but I needed it to stop being a ghost in that house." She took it slowly, like it might shatter at her touch, held it in her palm the way I'd held it so many nights, trying to understand where we'd gone wrong. "I hope Graham makes you happy." The words hurt coming out, but they were true. "I hope you find whatever it was you were looking for, whatever I couldn't give you." Marcus, I don't—" She shook her head. "I don't know what I was looking for. I just knew I couldn't keep drowning." "I know." I took a breath. "I should have been paying attention. Should have noticed you were underwater. That's something I have to live with." I reached down and pulled the wedding ring off my finger. It slid free easier than I expected, like it had been waiting for this moment, ready to let go. "I think I'm done wearing this now," I said. Not bitter, just honest. She looked at the ring, then at my face. Something passed between us, grief maybe, or recognition. The acknowledgement of an ending that had been coming for longer than either of us wanted to admit. "You were a good man, Marcus." Her voice broke on the words. "I just couldn't see it anymore." I nodded, couldn't speak. "And I'm sorry I stopped trying to show you I was still here," she added. "I should have fought harder, should have made you see. We both should have done a lot of things." I stepped back. The cold air rushed into the space between us. "Goodbye, Jenna." "Goodbye, Jenna." She didn't say anything, just stood there, clutching the watch, tears streaming down her face, as I turned and walked back to my van. I didn't look back, got in, started the engine, pulled away from the curb. And somewhere between her sister's house and the main road, I felt it, the shift. Not happiness, not relief. Something quieter. Something that felt like setting down a weight I'd been carrying so long, I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. I hadn't saved my marriage. Couldn't. It was already gone. But maybe, in letting her go without bitterness, without rage, without becoming the villain she could blame forever, maybe I'd save myself. The ring sat on the dashboard, catching the pale winter light. I left it there. The snow had stopped, and the world looked like it was waiting to be written on again. 2 weeks later, December now, the kind of cold that settles into your bones and stays there. I'd signed the papers 3 days ago. Uncontested, clean, no lawyers fighting over scraps. The house was on the market. I'd found an apartment near Danny's place, small but quiet, mine. Life has a way of continuing, even when you're not sure you want it to. I was at Hank's on a Tuesday afternoon, nursing a coffee instead of a beer. Something had shifted there too. The need to blur the edges fading into something like acceptance. Roy sat across from me, telling some story about a transmission job gone wrong, and I was actually listening, actually laughing in the right places. The door opened, bringing a gust of cold air, and Mrs. Delgado, bundled in a coat too big for her small frame. She spotted me and made her way over, that knowing look in her eyes. "Mijo," she said, sliding into the booth beside Roy. "I have something to ask you." "What's that?" "My husband, God rest him, he gave me a watch for our 20th anniversary. Beautiful thing. Stopped working years ago, and I never had the heart to fix it or replace it." She paused. "I heard you gave Jen his watch back to her. And I thought, maybe you could help me find a new one. Something simple. Something that works." I looked at her weathered face, her hopeful eyes. Thought about the watch sitting in a box at Jenna's sister's house, transformed from a symbol of my failure into something released, something free. "I can do that," I said. "Let me look into it." She patted my hand. "You're a good man, Marcus Webb. Don't let anyone tell you different, not even yourself." Sunday morning, clear skies for the first time in weeks, the sun low and bright over the snow-covered fields. Danny and I stood under the old oak tree on Dad's property, our breath fogging in the cold. I'd asked him to come with me this time, didn't want to be alone with the ghosts anymore. "You ever think about what Dad would say about all this?" Danny asked, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. I watched a crow lift off from a bare branch, its shadow sliding across the white ground. He'd say, "Keep moving." That's what he always said. "Yeah." Danny was quiet for a moment. But maybe he should have said, "Keep seeing." Might have made a difference. Maybe. When we stood there in the silence, two brothers looking at the land their father had worked, thinking about the things he'd taught them and the things he hadn't. "I used to think love meant staying," I said finally. The words came slow, careful, like I was discovering them as I spoke. "Showing up, being reliable, never leaving." Danny waited. "Now, I think it means being present, really present, even when it's easier not to be, even when you're scared of what you might see." He nodded. "That's a start, man. That's a real start." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A work call. Someone's heat had gone out. "Web HVAC," I answered. "What can I do for you?" Same words I'd said 1,000 times. But my voice was different, lighter somehow, like something had loosened in my chest. I hung up and looked at Danny. "Gotta go. Duty calls." Go save someone from freezing," he said, almost smiling. "It's what you do." I walked back to the van, my boots crunching through the fresh snow. Before I got in, I looked down at my left hand. The pale band of skin where my ring used to be was fading now. In a few more weeks, it would be gone entirely. I climbed in, started the engine. The heater kicked on, pushing warm air against my face. The snow stretched out ahead of me, clean and untouched, covering the road like a promise, and I drove toward it.